welcome to the NJS Law Podcast on negligence in women's health. Today we'll be talking openly about negligence in women's health, how it happens and what you can do if your standard of care you've received has fallen short. I'm Amanda, I'm a solicitor and director here at NJS Law, and I'm joined today by Leanne, a solicitor and head of our clinical negligence department. So when we talk about negligence in terms of women's health issues, what are we talking about from a legal perspective?
Okay, so we're talking about when a healthcare professional provides care that falls below the required standard, and as a result of that, it causes harm to the patient. Okay. So that could be an injury or a worsening of a condition. So, for example, it may be the delayed diagnosis of a condition, a gynecological condition, a misdiagnosis. Perhaps failure to investigate, which we often see in these cases. Lots of our clients report feeling that they've not been listened to, and it's then a failure to investigate that. And the impact being that the options available treatment-wise can then be limited on account of the delay from when the patient first presents. So it can be a number of things, but it's falling below that standard, and as a result of that, the patient or client suffers harm and injury.
Okay, so we're not looking for sort of perfect treatment or perfect care, we're just looking for treatment that really reaches the benchmark.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, with treatment, there's two different things. You go into treatment expecting a certain thing.
Yeah.
And if that treatment's been appropriate and it's been carried out to a standard that's acceptable, then that, just because you're unhappy with the outcome or it didn't quite do what they would have liked, that in itself isn't negligence. It has to be that there's a standard of care and we can evidence that the care provided falls below that standard. And also, as a result of that, there has to be harm or the injury becomes more significant or the condition worsens. We have to demonstrate that there's been some loss as a result of that.
Loss from it, yeah. Okay, so let's focus on gynecological issues. That's quite a wide area, isn't it? It covers quite a lot of things. So what kind of things fall under the umbrella?
Yeah, so they are often the most upsetting and emotional sort of inquiries that we get. Obviously, the person involved is affected significantly. So there could be issues in management, in treatment, in diagnosis. So it covers a really wide bracket. So there may be, for example, an injury that's sustained in surgery to one of the reproductive organs. So that would fall under that umbrella. Or, as we touched on previously, a failure to investigate. So clients may approach us with endometriosis, where they feel they've been presenting to the GP with the symptoms that warrant further investigation, and that's not happened. It could be that kind of thing. We also have clients who contact us where there's been a delay in diagnosis of cancer or even a misdiagnosis of cancer. So it covers a whole spectrum of things. And we're here to listen to every client and talk about their story, what's happened, and then look if we can help you pursue a claim. Because very often it's a case if you feel something's wrong in how you've been managed, that's often the main indicator really that would warrant taking that a little bit further.
There might be something there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just go back to endometriosis for a moment, because that's a large area, isn't it? A lot of women experience problems with this kind of condition and treatment. And it's often an area where women feel dismissed and not really taken seriously, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, that's what we find with a lot of our clients here. I think endometriosis is a condition. There's been a lot more publicity about that recently. And I think a lot of women are sort of sitting there saying, this is me.
This happened to me. I recognise this.
Yeah, I recognise those things. I think when we looked at some statistics, Endometriosis UK had advertised that it was almost 9 years for a diagnosis. I think it was 8 years and 10 months.
Blimey.
Yeah,
that's staggering, isn't it?
It is staggering, and a long time for, because ultimately with these numbers we forget that there are people behind those numbers
at the end of that.
And there are women suffering with chronic fatigue, heavy periods, heavy bleeding, significant period pain, pain with bladder and bowel movements. So symptoms that are going to impact your life really very significantly. I think what also astonished me is that some of the patients who reported their cases to Endometriosis UK had said that I think 50% almost, had attended the GP more than 10 times in connection with this. And I think, as you say, it's that feeling of almost, you're making a fuss about something that's not there. Almost belittling the patient. And I think then that leads to them suffering in silence. And then when they are eventually referred to a consultant, which I think, doesn't happen as often as we'd like from that first A&E attendance, then actually sometimes what's happened is the condition, with time, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
So then what may have been a treatment option may have, the prospect of that succeeding may have reduced, or it may not be an option anymore. Indeed,
this is an issue, isn't it, with this kind of condition? I think a lot of people think that there aren't any treatment options and that it's something they just have to live with.
Yeah.
But there are treatment options, aren't there?
Absolutely, and it's ensuring that they're diagnosed and then managed appropriately. And some of our clients have had surgery, and notwithstanding some action being taken, when we've looked at it in more detail, it's again that sort of, we have to assess, was the surgery that was carried out the correct surgery? Did it go far enough? Were there the required follow-ups? Because actually, notwithstanding some action being taken, we could find ourselves in a position whereby someone still continues to suffer. And yes, steps have been taken, but actually they still needed to do more. So I think really for me, the key is, if you feel that your GP's not listening, or some of those symptoms that I've mentioned resonate with you, push it through from a medical perspective, ask to see someone, but also contact us and let us have a look at the records and talk it through and see what if anything we can do. Yeah.
So this is an area we really wanted to cover on this podcast. This is fertility and reproductive health issues.
Okay, yeah.
So what kind of things can go wrong in this area?
So I think it kind of covers two areas really, doesn't it? I suppose you've got kind of the NHS treatment where it's required and it's not elective. Then we have clients who approach us where they've elected to have some kind of fertility treatment. And obviously with those clients, there's also, as well as the emotional impact and physical impact, those clients are approaches because there's likely to have been a financial impact as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So for example, I think, in this area, we may have surgical mistakes which have affected a reproductive organ. So you may have had surgery for one thing, and as a result, there's been an injury sustained to a reproductive organ.
Right.
Then, for example, you may have someone who presents at the GP and there's a failure to investigate and manage fertility issues. So failing to make the appropriate referrals. And then also we've seen where failing to then consider the results of those investigations. So again, it's all good and well referring someone on and having those investigations, but it's kind of what happens after that.
But you need to do something with it.
Yeah, they need to do something with it, because obviously, as people get older, or if there is a condition that's getting worse whilst all of this is going on, it may mean that their chance of having a baby is reduced. Then separate to that, as I say, we've got the clients who approach us where they've approached a private clinic or something like that. And there are various things that can happen there. So it may be that egg retrieval's not carried out to the appropriate standard, or the storage of the embryos. Obviously, significant things like a mix-up of embryos and things like that. So it covers a wide area, and obviously the impact, noting the subject, the impact to these patients and our clients is significant.
And I suppose as well, the fact that people elect to have this treatment in certain circumstances doesn't necessarily mean that they can't then go on and claim for negligence if the treatment's not carried out to the appropriate standard.
Absolutely not. Absolutely. I mean, if you've elected to do this, don't consider that to be a bar to pursuing a claim. Ultimately, when you approach a clinic or you're referred to a clinic, they still owe you a duty of care, and it's to carry out everything. So whether it's, all of the things we've discussed, maybe the consultants involved in giving you a treatment plan, prescribing medication, they're all still held to the same standard. And as if it was a result of their failure to meet that standard, you're caused harm, sort of an injury, or there's a condition that's made worse, absolutely contact us and we can look into it for you.
So let's move to maternity and birth injuries, because this is an area obviously that can have far-reaching consequences, and some of those consequences can last for a lifetime.
Yeah.
What kind of things do we see in this area that affect us and our clients?
Yeah, so I think ultimately for us, the starting point is that every mother and every baby deserves the right to have adequate care throughout pregnancy, labour and birth.
Yeah.
And obviously by its very nature, it's unpredictable. But there can be red flags and indicators that suggest things are happening whereby risk is increasing here. And it's a failure to act on those things is where we would then look in terms of whether there was a claim. So for example, there are maybe be issues with monitoring. So when someone presents or when someone's labouring, a failure to monitor appropriately and identify any risks. There may be a failure to escalate. So if the midwife with responsibility for that particular patient considers that there's an issue, a failure to escalate in a timely manner and thereafter for a decision to be made in a timely manner, because, time is often against, us in this situation. I think, from that point on, I think once the decision's been made, if there are still issues, it's then ensuring that, both mum and baby are assessed properly and any issues are identified, managed appropriately. Is the correct follow-up, referrals to NICU, or whatever is required for that particular patient and her baby. So it really goes from start to finish. We have to remember that there's, your whole 9 months generally to delivery and thereafter. And it's making sure that we're looking at, considering all of our clients that may have been affected along the way. And as you say, the impact of any negligence here is hugely
Can be
significant.
devastating. Yeah.
Yeah, I think even with things, where something happens to mum that seems relatively short-lived injury, not to undermine that in any way, but it may be a case that actually someone intends to have more children. But as a result of what happens in this particular labour, they decide not to. Or someone intends to go to work after 3 months, and because of what happens, they're unable to do that. So there's a whole range of things that can happen, and the impact of these claims is significant, as you've said.
Yeah. Okay. And so obviously it is a risky business, isn't it? Childbirth and maternity. But what we're looking at here is the risks sort of above the norm, isn't it? So yes, it's risky, but it's where a situation has arisen that's actually led to it being more risky than it ought to have been or needed to have been, really, which has then caused some sort of loss or something to happen that probably could have been avoided.
Yeah, absolutely. By its very nature, it's risky, and we all know that. I think it's, as you see, when the risks are increasing, it's the management of those risks. It's identifying those risks. Does this need escalating? Who is going to make a decision about this? Does this patient need referring for an emergency C-section, for example, and ensuring that we're looking at all of those aspects. But I think ultimately, for me, if you're listening to this and you think, I was never really happy about this, or something doesn't sit right about that, I think you're not losing anything by contacting us. Inquire, talk us through what's happened, and let's have a look at things. Some clients may have explored the PALS the patient advice liaison service. So you might make a complaint to PALS initially, and if you get a response from them that says nothing happened or there's no concerns, we're happy with the service. Sometimes our clients feel that they've reached the end of the road, but that's not always the case, and it may be that actually with the right legal support and us gathering evidence and looking at what's gone on,
Can be a different outcome.
it could be a very different outcome. Absolutely.
I suppose if you inquire, if we have a look at it for you and we say, no, we don't think there's anything there and that you were properly looked after, then at least don't you?
You've got the peace of mind of that. You can put it to one side, but we need to bear in mind as well, limitation on these claims. We have a 3-year period in which we need to act. So I think, with young children, time goes very quickly.
It does.
But I think if there is something there that's niggling away, contact us at the earliest opportunity. We can get the records, we can look at them and advise you on your options, really, and in the next steps in the claim process.
So let's make this practical now.
Okay.
So how do we know the difference between when it's negligent and just an unfortunate outcome?
Yes, and I think that's something that we do get contacted by clients where we listen to what they have to say and we consider everything, but ultimately it may be a case where there's just a poor outcome. So despite it being reasonable and appropriate, it doesn't quite get to where they would like to, and they may need a repeat of an orthopaedic surgery, for example. And obviously negligence is different to that. It's where a healthcare professional provides care that falls below the standard, and as a result of that, you've suffered harm, an injury, or a condition's been made worse. So, by that I mean, for example, if someone contacts us in respect of the delayed diagnosis for cancer,
Yeah.
and ultimately that person will have always had cancer.
Yes.
It's being able to identify it at the earliest opportunity, because the impact of obviously not doing that, it can be heartbreaking, and it's making sure that that we were able to highlight when it should have been spotted, and then they can be treated accordingly, and often have more treatment options because it's spotted early. So that's what I mean by negligence, in that setting. It covers so many different things. It can be being referred on, so the GP identifying the red flags and referring you on to the right consultant. It can be to do with radiographers. It can be to do with the interpretation of test results, treatment options. It covers, it covers such a wide range of things in women's health, but also generally, in negligence. But yeah, it's key that we differentiate between that. But I think ultimately, if you feel that you may have had a poor outcome and you're questioning the negligence, as we've said, previously, contact us and let us have a look at that for you.
Yeah. Okay. And can you just recap on the time limits for us then for making these claims?
Yeah, so it's 3 years from either the date of the injury or the date you became aware.
Okay.
So as we touched on with the delayed diagnosis of cancer, for example, that would be the date on which you became aware you had it, because we would then look backwards in your records. The records are the key evidence in these kinds of cases, as them all really. And we would track back to actually when should action have been taken. So we would go back and you presented on X date with these symptoms. That was a red flag, failure to refer on, for example.
So we could work that out for you, couldn't we, when your date of knowledge effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key is as well, when people contact us, if something's been going on for a number of years, one of the key questions is, why have you contacted us today? Something will have generally happened
Trigger that.
to trigger that call, and that's key really. And then, as I say, we would look at your records, and we would obtain all of those for you. I think some clients might feel that they have to come to us with a perfectly presented case, and that's absolutely not correct. We're here to do that for you.
That would be nice.
Yeah, and guide you through the process. We would obtain the records, we would go through them, and we will advise you every step of the way as to where we're up to, what we're looking for, advice on the legal jargon that surrounds these claims,
Sure.
and talk you through it so you've got the options, you can make an informed decision.
Okay. And in terms of evidence and documentation and that kind of thing, what do clients need to bring to us, or will we get all of that for them?
We'll do it all for you. Just contact us. In that initial call, you'll have the opportunity to speak to a solicitor in our clinical negligence department. And I think that is one of the things that makes us stand out here, that you can get through to a solicitor who's experienced in these claims. They will take from you what they consider to be the relevant information. So with these claims, obviously, because the impact is so significant on someone's life.
Yeah, and they're emotional, aren't they?
Very emotional. And our clients come to us and they have a story to tell us. And what it's our job to do is pick out the key points as to where we consider there may have been breaches, and then look at the impact on you. So physical impact, emotional impact, financial impact. The records are the starting point, we would look at those, and then we'd look to get independent expert evidence on your behalf. And they would then confirm. So we would approach a GP, for example, to comment on the standard of care given by your GP. And we'll do it all
Guide
for
you
you.
through that.
Guide you through the process and make it as easy as possible for you. I think it can seem quite daunting to a client, but that's why we're here to take you through.
Yeah, that's our job, isn't it, to manage that?
Absolutely. And we're on your side. We want to get to the bottom of it for you and advise you. And as we said, if you approach us and we don't think there's anything we can do, if nothing else, you have peace of mind.
Exactly. At least you know.
It's been considered from a legal perspective, and we're able to offer advice to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. Thank you very much.
So if you take one thing away from today, let it be this. You deserve to be taken seriously. Pain isn't normal just because you're a woman. Persistent problems deserve investigation.